are coming in on a listen mode. The service we want to offer out to all of you as part of this process, Form B you'll learn during the training, is typically a Form B interview. And so we'll be talking more towards the end of the webinar as a way that you can engage in that, whether you are a PIDAP, Positive Youth Development After School Grant Program grantee, or are not. We want to be able to provide you and support you in your ability to improve program quality. I'm going to turn our training over today to Steph, who is going to be our trainer with the Weichert Center, and Jackie, who is going to be the TA assistant from the Weichert Center, who's going to be helping you out throughout the training. And just want to thank you all again for joining us for the training and engaging in the quality improvement process. Without any further ado, I'll pass it over to Steph.
All right, thanks, Thomas. Welcome, everyone. So it's the PQA Form B overview webinar. It's going to be a great hour here. I'm a field consultant with the Weichert Center. This is my old horse, Sid. And I ran an outdoor education program in Duluth, Minnesota for many, many years. And so we taught kids to dog sled and drive draft horses and kayak and rock climb. And so this is Sid and this is me. And now I come to you from my dining room table. So it's great to be here. So just a little bit about Zoom etiquette here. The main thing about this is thinking about the chat box. So feel free to use the chat box for questions. All this, like we're going to use that for some other activities here. You can download the chat if you want. And we're going to record the session today. It's recording right now. So just know you'll be able to share it with others who are not here if you need to, but it is being recorded. So today we're going to give you an overview of Form B and how does that fit into that quality improvement system. And actually Form B is really great because it's all the things that are, when you're thinking about hiring staff and setting up policies and procedures and practices, Form B covers all of those things that really help create the foundation of a program that you really need to be successful. And so the practices that happen during the programming time are measured by Form A, the youth PQA, but Form B is really like the things that are the foundational piece of developing a program and really making sure that the foundational parts are together and that they also have youth voice and input whenever possible. So we'll also learn how to score this thing, and then how do you do a basic assessment using Form B. So that's what we're going to be doing, and this is what our agenda looks like. So we just did some logistics. We'll be doing some more welcome and introductions. And then we're going to talk about the quality improvement process. We'll do an overview of the form. We'll think about how to complete it, and then what you do with the data once you have collected it, of course, and then time for questions at the end. And of course, questions throughout. So again, if you think of something, feel free to come off a mute and just ask your question. Feel free to interrupt. It's all good. Put it in the chat box. And Thomas for sure is going to jump in right now with just a little bit more information. So go ahead, Thomas.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that stuff. One of the things I did realize is we do have a few folks on the call who I believe have not been engaged previously with Form A, which is the Youth Program Quality Assessment Tool, or the School Age Program Quality Assessment Tool. Those tools that what Steph has in her hand right now, those are tools to be able to directly measure the interactions and environment inside of a after-school or youth program space. Form B is designed, as you'll see, is really looking more at that managerial coordinator level and being able to look to see internally at the organization the supports that are in place. So I just wanted to make sure, so we're kind of starting off on the same place. For those of you who have not heard of or engaged with before, the Form A, which is again, Youth Program Quality Assessment Tool, YPQA, or the School Age Program Quality Assessment Tool, SAPQA. We are happy to connect you to those resources. So just feel free to give me a shout in the chat box and I can connect that during the training for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, absolutely. So, and wherever you are coming from, whether you've used the youth or school age PQA before or you have not, this is a great starting place. And so I'm excited to introduce you to this Form B starting with that opening activity here. And so this is mostly sunny or chance of rain. So it's a little weather forecast here. It's the weather like in your program. When I was up in Anchorage at the beginning of August, it rained a lot, like the hardest it had rained in forever, of course. So, but really the whole webinar and the PQA Form B, it's all about assessing the environment of the organization that you work in. So we're going to start off today by gaining some familiarity with some of the Form B competencies. So we're going to do a quick reflection on your own program's capacity. So what's going to happen right now is I'm going to share my screen and show you a Jamboard, and we're going to go through this, but you're going to open the Jamboard on your own here, and Jackie's going to paste the Jamboard link into the chat box here. So once everyone gets that Jamboard, there it is, you can open that up in a new browser window, but I'm going to share my screen so we can kind of see it all happening at once. And we're going to spend a couple of minutes on each of the 4 pages of the Jamboard. And so when you see the weather options here, we've got, partly cloudy, sunny, some rain, and maybe a tornado here. So when you think about youth having an influence on the structure and policy of your organization or programs to tap youth interest and build multiple skills, this is the first page of the Jamboard. So you should be able to click on the link, open it up, and then you should be able to play with it. And I'll just give you a little tour here. So on the side here, this is a sticky note. And so you can click on the sticky note and it'll open it up, and you can type whatever you want, and you can change the color. And so you can put a sticky note on there. You can also put in an image. You can also put a text box in there. So it is a fun thing to do. Are you able to get into the Jamboard? Is everyone able to get in?
Steph, I think we have the link to the wrong Jamboard. It's for the school age Jamboard.
Oh, hang on. I'll put it in here. Let's try again. I was gonna say I don't see anyone connected, so I'm just talking. Try this link. Oh, there we go. Like, that makes it better. So, okay. So now we can play around on this Jamboard here. Thank you, everyone. So when we think about you and think about your own program here, do youth have an influence on the structure and policy of your organization? And do programs tap youth interests and build multiple skills? So just kind of think about, where are you? So we got a sunshine there. So yeah, a little bit of rain and clouds, a little sunny and cloudy. Yeah, and you can just kind of pull those things up there. So you can use other things too. Look at all the great Jamboard features I wasn't even thinking about. So it looks like, yeah, interesting to see where we're at here with each of these things. So before we move on to the next Jamboard here, kind of looking at the trends, anyone want to share anything that you notice about the youth influencing structure and policy versus tapping youth interests and building skills? What are you noticing? Or if you want to talk about your own program here for a second, where are you at with these 2 pieces here? And feel free to just type in the chat box if that feels more comfortable too. I'll read it out loud for you. But what are you noticing? And I will warn you, I'm not, I'll give you Zoom quiet, which sometimes feels super awkward, but it also allows you time to think and type. So what are you noticing? Everyone's a little shy. When you look at the difference here, which one's easier? Which one's easier to do based on just your weather report here?
This is Tyler. Yeah, it's much easier for us to get input from youth in the program about what they're into, respond directly to that rather than the larger picture structure and policy piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not alone thinking that, Tyler. Thomas writes in the chat box, oftentimes my experience has been that youth are involved in the what we do today and not the how we do as an agency. And Lisa says, programs are youth focused, but not youth led. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do another one here. Thanks, everyone. So this time, the organization supports academic enrichment, and the organization supports staff and youth relationship building. There's already some sunshines there, which is great. So what else does your organization do as far as supporting academic enrichment or supporting staff and youth relationship building? So what are you noticing about this slide here? Now that we're starting to get warmed up a little bit. And this will be interactive throughout. There'll be things for you to do and talk about. So however you want to do that, whether you feel comfortable writing in the chat box or sharing out loud, just know that there'll be plenty more for you to talk about and work through together here. What are you noticing?
Well, we all really value the relationship building between staff and youth, which is, I see as definitely a foundation. So it's nice to see that across other programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And some programs may not be academic enrichment programs, right? And so that might not be a focus. And Thomas writes, programs are focused on relationship building and less on academic enrichment. Aaron writes, academic enrichment probably depends on program design. Absolutely. So, yep, in my program I ran, we didn't do any academic enrichment. It was all about relationship building and skills development. So, and Lisa says, since COVID, many programs are understanding the need to support academic aspects of youth. So yeah, so maybe because of the pandemic, programs might be changing their focus a little to do more support. And that can be challenging. So it could be a kind of partly sunny thing because the challenge of moving to that it can be difficult. Thanks, everyone. Let's do another one here. This time, staff availability and longevity with the organization support staff and youth relationships, and staff qualifications support a positive youth development focus. And look like we got a little partly cloudy and a little sunny already. So what else do you have here for these? Thinking about leadership and management here. So what are you noticing about this one, leadership and management? Looks a little different than our first two slides, doesn't it?
I think one of the biggest challenges with after-school programming in general is there isn't a clear path for new employees to see where, not only within their own organization, but within the nonprofit world of youth development. They don't know the path, and I think this is a challenge, something that I believe we should be doing a better job, so that somebody coming in, maybe they're either they have an associate's degree or they're out of high school, but they want a path, a professional path within youth development, is to help them see what they could be doing in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and so on. But collectively, from my experience and interactions with other organizations, this is something we don't do very well.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. I would agree. And actually my HR processes for our own organization talked about where can you be in 5 or 10 or 20 years? And sometimes there's not a lot of places to go. Like there's just very few positions as you move up. So what does that look like? How do we paint that picture? Erin says it's difficult season for staffing for sure. And that Lisa says there's a shortage of qualified staff. And I know talking with other folks around the country in the last couple of weeks, like people are like, can you pass a background check? Great, you're hired. So that's rough, right? Especially when it's not just about getting a warm body in the door, it's about like relationship building, right? And having skills to be able to really put into place these positive youth development qualities and qualifications. So let's do one more. Thanks everyone for this. So this last one talks about family and community. And so the program builds linkages with families and the program builds linkages with the community. So we've got some sunshine going on. What's your weather forecast look like for reaching out to families and the community? So what are you noticing about this frame here and thinking about family and community? I notice there's no tornadoes on any of the slides, so that's a good sign. And I've got 2 dogs in the background, one of whom is 2 weeks new to this household. So apologies for if your dogs are now barking.
Steph, what I would say is I think this really depends on the program type that we see is, programs that are really, younger kid centric, maybe elementary school, they may have stronger relationships with families, whereas more of a teen drop-in program may struggle with that family engagement, but maybe are more connected to community based. I think one of the things that I frequently see with programs across our state is that how is it connected to the community maybe varies, that it could be that they have, volunteers or guest speakers coming in, and that's the connection to the community, but frequently it seems like the community doesn't know that the programs are happening. So, really looking at community linkage as a two-way street, not just how are we bringing community into our program, but how are we engaging and letting the community know that we're aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting to think about how the person walking in my front yard is going to make the dogs bark. 1 second. It's my neighbor. It's very exciting for dogs. So Lisa writes in the chat box, oh no, hang on. Oh yeah, let's see here. Joseph's got a link here. Oh, from the forum, sweet. So yeah, the joys of working from home. Sweet. Design principles for community-based settings. Nice. So thanks for the forum plug there, Joseph. That's awesome. So Erin says, the way we engage with families has changed since COVID. So things like family nights, right? So more resources here. Nice. I love it. Yeah. So it's interesting to think about what's challenging, what comes easy, what your program is designed to do, what you might need to change because of COVID or just other things changing. So Form B is really about helping you figure out how to measure these things and really decide where you want to make some changes or improvements in those types of things. So reaching out to families, thinking about structure and how we involve young people. So this is what we're going to be doing here. And yes, the White Group Center is a program of the Forum for Youth Investment. So based in Ypsilanti, Michigan. All right. Well, thanks everyone. That was great. So right now what we're going to do is an overview of the Youth Program Quality Intervention, or the YPQI. And really what it is, it's this process that it's it takes you through a process for how to make improvements in your program based on doing some research about what kind of the dogs are going to drive me absolutely crazy. That's all right. So the first part of this is the research. One moment. If I close the curtains, will it work? Go lay down. Sled dog voice. Okay. I love this slide. You've now had a chance to take a look at it. So some of you may have taken something called PQA Basics. Some of you are seeing this for the first time or have seen it in other places, but this is from the National Research Council. It's key features of positive youth development settings. And when you look at this list, oh my dog is gonna ring. Seriously. Okay, so anyway, when you look at, I'm just gonna take a deep breath here. When you look at this, when you think about all of these key features, they're pretty abstract. And so what we want to do is turn them into concrete measures. So when we think about how we do that, there is a process called assess, plan, and improve. And this is the continuous quality improvement process. And so the youth and school age PQAs actually take these features and turn them into concrete, measurable best practices, so that what looks like appropriate structure, how do you measure that? That's what the youth and school age PQAs do, is they help you figure out those measures so that everyone's using the same language and we have the same understanding of what the best practices are. So assess, plan, and improve is the process. So thinking about observing and collecting information and data about the program, planning and using that data to create improvement processes and ideas, and then the improvement phase where you're actually carrying out the plan. So for Form B, we can do the same process here, thinking about staff practices and measures, but this is what the youth program quality intervention is. It's assess, plan, and improve. So the process happens at all levels of an organization. So thinking about the policy level, you make a decision to implement the intervention and provide necessary support. So that's like Thomas, like Alaska After School Network. We're going to provide some supports and information about program quality. So then at the organizational and setting level, you've got managers and folks who support and coordinate the improvement efforts. And part of that is training staff. And then at the point of service, you've got staff improving their practice and increasing the quality of the experience for young people. So you can kind of see how this all fits together. And you can also see where Form A and Form B intersect here. And so Form A, which Thomas talked about, where it's looking at things like, do young people have opportunities to lead a group? Or is there belonging? Is there reflection, those sorts of practices? Now you have the organizational setting for Form B, where it's also about thinking about the staff practices, but also the policy setting. So how do we engage both from that policy setting and organizational setting so that we can then be bringing those point of service practices and really make those as strong as possible. So you can get to changes at the point of service, which is Form A, right? The practices, by examining the structures that support it in Form B. So really this is about structural support here. And I think a lot of times you don't even think about it, how important the idea of the structural pieces really are for making sure that you can build those relationships. You can have those things that you're looking for. So thinking about program leadership, does everyone feel safe and supported to lead if you have defined organizational structure? So, and then staff feel safe, right? So, and then youth feel safe when they're included. So they know, everyone knows what's going on. There's this open communication. And honestly, like thinking about my own experiences with staff, like I can think of something as the founder of an organization, but the best ideas I've ever had for the organization have come from like new staff and interns and volunteers who like see things with fresh eyes. Young people themselves have been the folks who have actually made it better. And so it's really wonderful to think about how do you formalize that instead of maybe haphazardly getting folks to share their ideas or thoughts, but how do you formalize it so that you can include that and be intentional about it? That's what Form B is. So we're going to do a little practice scenario here. So your program has a goal of increasing reflection opportunities for young people. Your SMART goal is all youth will participate in at least one reflection activity each week. So when you think about this, what are some organizational supports that you might need to make this happen? So think of the things, training, scheduling, curriculum, meeting structure. So all youth will participate in at least one reflection activity each week. So if you're going to make that happen and have some sort of reflection, and does anyone want to give an example of a program reflection activity that they've seen or done that's really powerful that you might want to just share to give us an example of what reflection could look like in a program? Not to put you on the spot, but anyone have an example of reflection you'd want to share with us to kind of give us an idea? Go ahead, Tyler.
We stole one from Onward and Upward. I believe Randy may have been on the call earlier. I don't see him now, but the acronym is STOP, S-T-O-P, shout outs, takeaways, open mic, and plans. So it's an end of the day reflection kind of ritual.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's fun, actually. If I were running a program, I would steal that. So thanks, Tyler. So Tyler might actually know what the process is of like what was needed. And maybe you can even share some of those things in the chat box. But if you were going to decide, okay, I'm going to do something like that, maybe that thing, maybe a different reflection strategy, but I need to make this happen, right? One activity each week. What do you need to do? So just brainstorm in the chat box. What are things that you would need to help your staff be able to implement at least one reflection strategy a week? And it could be the same one. Maybe you do that every Friday, right? And that's your goal, is just every Friday you stop and reflect using STOP. So what would you need to make that happen? Just kind of, and you can brainstorm out loud, but just think about, throw some things in the chat box or think about what would need to happen. And then the fish philosophy. So make their day, play, be there, choose your attitude, which is fun stuff from the Pike Place Market. Fish folks, I think. Thomas says structured time to build into program schedule for time for reflection. So yeah. And so like learning about some different places and philosophies and strategies, right? And then scheduling the time for it. So what are your resources? How do you build the time in to do it once you have the resources and the philosophy that you want to use? Lillian says time dedicated to learning techniques for reflection. Yeah, so time to practice it, right? Joseph says scheduling and facilitator training, right? So make sure it's in the schedule, you have time. Oh yeah, now they're coming. Aaron says meaningful content to reflect on. Absolutely. So think about what are you doing in programs that young people would even talk about in reflection. Tyler said staff need time outside of program to plan their reflection process. And again, to reflect themselves on youth feedback. So, and then Thomas says reflection strategies and activities to actually do. It's a lot, right? Like just in this little 30-second brainstorm here, you're like, okay, now we need time outside of program. We need resources. We need time to practice. We need time to brainstorm it. We need time for youth to give feedback. That's pretty cool, but that's a lot. So how do you measure that and how do you get there? So that's what Form B will help you do as well. So thanks everyone for that. So let's do a little overview here of Form B. What is Form B? Well, it measures organizational policies and practice. And it's interviews, it's a series of items and interview questions. And the interview questions correspond to certain items in the tool. So again, thinking about structural features of the program, policies and practices, staff development, strategies for program improvement. That's what Form B measures. So a little bit about the structure. So this is the interview survey portion. So it's a different method of data collection that's used for Form B. So Form A data collection, for those of you who've used that, It's observation. You go in and you watch and observe and take notes, and then you score the tool based on your observation. Form B is a little different, where you are actually doing an interview, and then you are scoring the tool based on the answers to those interview questions. So when you think about that, you need to gather up some documents prior to, and then the actual interview lasts about an hour to an hour and a half by the time you really sit down and talk through it. And I've done a number of these interviews over the years with programs, and it's really fascinating to have these conversations and really have, people looking at their documents and thinking about these kinds of practices and policies. So why would you use Form B? Well, it's a chance to measure what's standing in your way and what can help at the organizational level, right? So it also can help you think about, if you're using Form A, which is the practices, can help answer some of your why questions. So if you use Form B along with Form A, it can give you that additional context. But for example, thinking about, well, why don't we use more hands-on learning activities? Well, we don't have enough planning time. Or why don't our kids pick up their garbage? Well, they don't feel ownership of the commons because they don't have input into how it looks, right? So it's super interesting to think about how policies, procedures, practices, other fundamental things that seem maybe not as exciting as like, I'm going to lead this amazing reflection activity, that can really have a huge impact on the quality of the program and also the engagement of young people in it. So Form B overview of the form looks like this. There are 3 domains. So the domains are kind of big chunks of this tool. And there's one that's youth-centered policies and practices. And we got a chance to see a little bit from each of these domains in our weather report activity. So thinking about positive youth development and youth voice and governance. Also thinking about our staff and having high expectations. So even if you have to hire someone because they pass a background check, sometimes people learn really, like, it's amazing what sometimes can happen when we have high expectations for young people and staff, right? So how are we helping support our staff in their growth and development? How are we creating a supportive program environment for young people and staff? And like helping everyone realize that there's a quality improvement focus. So even if you walk in off the street and you've never done this before, you can learn the skills and we're there to support you. And then the access, right? So how do you make sure you've got staffing and scheduling taken care of in a way that makes sense and is easy to understand? And then those connections to school, family, and community. So, and being clear and having all these resources for folks so that they can kind of see the pathways is going to help with staff retention as well, because people will know what to expect and they'll also know where they're going and what the goal is. So we're going to do a little bit on scoring Form B. So there's a process for this that's 4 simple steps. If you look at the form itself, it's on pages 4 and 5. And if you happen to have a PQA handbook, I happen to have one for reference. You do not need this, by the way, but here it is. If you happen to have one, it's on pages 32 to 34. But there's 4 steps, right? So before the interview, you gather all the stuff. So if anyone's gone through an accreditation visit or other things, you just gather documents, right? It's all good. Pretty straightforward. Then the next step is that hour to hour and a half interview. And then you come back afterwards and score the indicators based on the interview responses. And then there is something called Scores Reporter. Thomas, are you using Scores Reporter up there, or what's your process there?
We will be using Score Reporter, yes.
Fabulous. Scores Reporter is fantastic. Not everyone uses it, but most people do, because you can enter your scores into the Scores Reporter and it prints reports for you. And that is a wonderful thing. So those are the steps, and let's just break these down a little bit more. So this pre-interview preparation. So think about who needs to be involved in the organizational interview. So you can also have staff at the same site interview each other. So it's kind of a self-interview, right? So who are the people who manage the site level direct program staff? Everyone should have the form, and it's, it takes a little while to get everything ready, a couple hours, 2-3 hours to look at the form and gather all the documentation. So this is probably not the greatest thing to do the day of, although I've seen it happen where people are like, oh, let me go get that, but that takes longer. So giving people enough lead time to be able to grab documents, that's helpful. Otherwise, sometimes you need to look at numbers or other things. If you don't have those at the ready, it takes a lot longer. So here is a preparation document. So this is a table. It's called About Form B handout. And I think we have that about Form B handbook or document. I'll find it in a minute if we don't. Jackie, do you have that document? So we'll look for it, but this is just basically a list of the things that you should use to prepare. So it's nice to have a reference. So the next step is thinking about the organizational interview process. And so some tips. This is a low stakes process. There's not a good or bad or right or wrong that happens. This is really just the idea of continuous quality improvement. So figuring out what's going on. For years, I ran my program that had no policies and procedures in place. We just showed up and did work with kids. And then slowly over time, for various reasons, we started to document things. And that was everything from HR processes to policies and procedures. So by the time we were able to do camp accreditation, we had everything we could possibly want and added more things, right? So you don't also have to have an answer for every question, but it really gives you an idea to see like what's what, where are you at, where are things missing, and where are you really strong? So that's important. So steps 2 and 3 about that organizational interview, you can do it in 2 separate meetings where you can complete the interview and score, or you can just do it all at once, just depending on how much time you've got. But as a team, you answer the interview questions. And then before you score, you get to talk about each item and row as a team. And then together, everybody just selects the best score. And then sometimes you're like, well, I don't agree about that. And so you might note anything where you have maybe contentious is a strong word, but if you have a good discussion about it and it's hard to come to a consensus, that might be an area to focus on in your improvement plan. So it takes a little while to do this organizational interview and scoring. And again, you can break it up, but you can do it all at once. So 3 hours for the total process. So an hour to an hour and a half to do the interview process, and then another hour to hour and a half for the scoring piece of it, where you have those conversations and everyone's talking about it and really figuring out what the score should be. And then the last step, and just know we're going to practice scoring in a few minutes here. This is where you enter data into the scores reporter. So it's really lovely. Here's the scores reporter right here. And then you can go in and you can enter the data for Form B, and it takes you right step by step through it. So right now we're going to do some practice scoring, and this is youth influence setting activities. So this is one of the scales in the tool. So youth-centered policies and practices is one of those 3 chunks, those domains. So this is extremely hard to read. So I'm gonna look at it at my big screen and look like off in the distance because my big screen is there. And so this is about how are young people involved in deciding on artwork, murals, furniture styles, and other aspects of your program space. So that's the first thing. So we're gonna take a look at the item, and then I want you to think about how this is, how do you do this in your own program? So you can share out loud or in the chat box, but when you think about youth and adults sharing responsibility for decisions about the design and use of the physical environment, are youth consulted about the design and use of the physical environment, or no youth are involved in the decision-making about design and use? So thinking about your own program, how do you have young people involved in deciding on artwork, murals, furniture styles, other kinds of program space things? So go ahead and answer either out loud or in the chat box. How does your program involve young people on the design and physical environment? And Tyler says seasonal decoration, so gather input and suggestions for materials and space usage. Youth create content for bulletin boards from Aaron. Yeah, anyone else have anything where youth are, Tyler says artwork and youth created displays. Yeah, so when you think about this, you can think about how you might score this. It sounds like there's some shared responsibility and also some consultation. And so you can think about, would this be a 3 or would this be a 5? Clearly, there is some youth decision making. So that would be the conversation you'd have with your team. How much is this? Is it a consultation, or is it really a shared responsibility for thinking about the design and use of the physical environment? So how would you score this, do you think, based on our responses in the chat box here? And knowing just a little bit about that, you might have to combine the scores to figure it out, right? So if there's something that's a 3 and something that's a 5, you're going to decide which one is it. What do you think? And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but what do you think would be an appropriate answer here? So. And Tyler says, we're guests in school facilities, so our program often doesn't have full latitude on facilities, so I'd rate us a 3. Aaron says a 3 as well, so yeah. Thomas says, frequently the physical space is rented, so there's limited ability to modify it. So example, a soccer field, NPR library, but they may have a bulletin board or materials that are temporarily used during the program space. So yeah. And so even if you have a limited physical space or it's limited ability to modify it, you can think about how could you move from consultation to, hey, we have control over this. Let's work together to share the responsibility for how we can change or decorate or modify what we have control over. So thinking about how you might move from a 3 to a 5 would be the next step if that's important to you. So we've got some fine evidence here, right? And we've seen that in the chat box. So here's some just sample evidence. Our Youth Advisory Council designed the mural in the main lobby. So how would you score this item if this was the evidence? You can just write your answer in the chat box. So we're getting some answers here. And yes, in this case, if this was the evidence, this is a 5. So they designed the mural in the main lobby. There it is. So when you have a chance to design things or plan for things, that is definitely an opportunity for sharing decisions about the design and use of that environment. All right, so right now we are going to do a little practice scoring here. Thomas asked a question, how long does that stay a 5 if the youth that designed it are no longer in the program? Well, that's a good question. So I think then you would need to have examples of things that aren't just 10 years ago. And I think about like Chicago O'Hare, there's like After School Matters, and there are pictures that they designed in one of the like concourse hallways. They're pretty old now. They've been there over 10 years. So does that count anymore, or do they need to have it kind of refreshed? So each year, so I think that would be a good question to ask. How long ago was it, right? To see, and then you can decide. So we're going to practice scoring and think about staff development here. This is on page 16. If you have the digital PDF copy, if you have a hard copy of it, it's page 15. So this is an interview question then. What sort of group planning process does staff take part in before or at the start of the program cycle? And so something you can think about right now. What's an example from your program of staff planning before the program starts? Let me just throw them in the chat box here. So Tyler says we have about 10 days between summer and school year programs for planning, prep, and outreach. So perfect. We're going to use your evidence there, Tyler. So based on that answer, how would you score your program? So there's 10 days between summer and school year for planning, prep, and outreach. So is it a 5 where all staff meet? Is it 3, some but not all staff meet, or staff do not meet as a group? So what do you think? Based on, use Tyler's evidence here. What do you think this one scores?
We would need some follow-up questions.
Okay. So what would you need to follow up with? Let me go back to.
It's not clear that all staff participate.
Sure. So maybe you'd ask Tyler, do all staff participate in this 10 days of training?
And from different programs that are involved, that's
Mhm.
the question I would follow up with.
Yeah. So Tyler, does that count? Do you have different people from different programs together?
Yeah, in our case, it would be a mixture of, yes, all locations and programs together and site-specific planning.
Great job, Tyler. You get a 5, buddy.
And it's really great to ask the follow-up questions, right? So we got some good information at the beginning, and it's important to know a little bit more and dig a little deeper to make sure we can really answer the question, right? Because it's about program offerings, all staff, different program offerings, meeting before. In this case, you do get a 5. So let's take a look at another one here, just again to practice the scoring here. So this is an example. We don't really have a policy, but 2 of our staff like to create their lesson plans together. So if this was the evidence, not Tyler's, how would you score this one? What do you think? 2 staff work together. They create their lesson plans. Yeah, so this is a 3. So got some staff, but not all who are planning. Absolutely. Let's do another one here. This is supportive social norms. Oh my gosh. So this is about asking about written behavior expectations, how kids acknowledge those behavior expectations. If you're looking at the digital tool, it's page 18. Page 17, if it's the hard copy. So the interview question looks like this. Are there any sort of written behavioral or social expectations, such as a code of conduct? So does anybody have a code of conduct or a written behavioral expectations in your program? And you can just put yes or no, and maybe who's got something that's written down that's behavioral code of conduct? We had a written full value contract is what we called it that everyone had to sign. Yeah. So based on that question, how would you score your program here? Expectations for personal behavior and social interaction are documented. Expectations for personal and social interaction are not documented, or are documented but not acknowledged by some youth, or expectations for personal behavior and social interaction are not clearly identified. So that's the 1. So the 5 is expectations are documented. 3 is not documented or not acknowledged by some, or not clearly identified. So based on that evidence from our group with 2 different written behavioral expectations, how would this score? It would be a 5 for sure. Yeah, because it's written down and everyone, as long as everyone acknowledged it, right? So everyone acknowledges this, you go over it in some way, maybe everyone has to sign it before they show up at the program. So what about this evidence? We have group norms posted on the wall of the program space. So how would you score this one? Yeah, so this would be a 3. That's my 7th grader. This is a very exciting webinar today. So yeah, so they're on the wall, but not everyone has to acknowledge them because they're just kind of posted there, and maybe someone does, maybe they don't. So let's do one more here. This is practicing with continuous improvement. Item 1, youth outcomes. The interview question looks like this. How do you measure youth outcomes? And how do the measurements tell you? So share an example of how you measure youth outcomes in your program. How do you measure those? And this is page 22 of the PDF or 21 of the hard copy. So how do you measure youth outcomes? And maybe you don't, so that's all right. for time's sake, what I'll do is give you some evidence here. 1 year. Oh, and then Tyler says we conduct a Youth Thrive survey periodically. Teacher surveys about student improvement in different areas. There we go. And 1 year we did a survey to figure out how many students got into college. So organization regularly assesses youth outcomes. Organization has assessed youth outcomes, but has no formal plan for regular assessment, or one organization does not assess youth outcomes. So what do you think? Let's use this evidence here. 1 year, we did a survey to figure out how many students got into college. How would you score this one? Yeah, it's a 3. It's kind of not really a plan, right? So there we go. So one more practice scoring. This is about access and communication with families. So how do you communicate with families and how often? So throw in the chat box how you communicate with your families and how often. Let's see what you got. And you can score yourself based on this too. So all right, so Tyler says weekly emails, text lists, calls and check-ins as needed or as arise during the program. Aaron says mass notification system bi-weekly. So how would you score based on your answers? Just given 3 pieces of popcorn. So 5, yeah. So these are pretty structured things, right? So bi-weekly systems, weekly emails, text lists, and then as needed things as well. So let's look at one more piece of evidence here. We have a family picnic in spring and a family carnival in the fall where families can come and learn more about program while kids play games. How would you score this one? Again, thinking about established mechanisms for regular communication with families of youth participants versus informal or regular or no communication. I don't know how you run a youth program with no communication, but perhaps it's possible. So this one's actually a 5 because they do a family picnic and a family carnival. So even though it's not like a weekly email or other things, it's something that they're planned and like they know I can come to the winter picnic and that's where or a family carnival and that's where I can come and learn more, or I can it's an established type of thing. So a dinner or picnic or something like that does count, even if it's just twice a year. And again, you might want to do more than this, but something like this will absolutely count. So any thoughts or questions about just these examples so far here? How are you feeling about Form B and what it measures? And then we're going to just give you a little wrap up here. Thomas has got a thumbs up. Well, we have just a few minutes left. So Joseph says, feel great. Thanks for support. Excellent. So you're welcome. Thanks for being here. So just a little bit thinking about making some meaning from this data here. So if you're using both forms, Form A and Form B side by side, you can think about some questions. What stands out? What are themes? What are areas for improvement? Where do they converge and where are they different? And what structures might you change if you're going to improve data for both Form A and Form B? Again, remembering that sometimes the structures and the word I cannot get out of my mouth right now, the logistics are important and they really help make big changes happen where you're like, oh, wow, just changing that structural thing has really changed the behaviors in my program. So here's an example from Form A. So if all youth have an opportunity to lead a group, which was high, and Form B, you have low scores with youth and staff share responsibilities for hiring, training, and evaluating staff, you might see a place where the data converges here, right? So this is sort of leadership opportunities. And so if you're doing great, you can use this as a jumping off point to engage young people in program design. Or you can start here to scaffold youth to take on more intensive leadership roles. So maybe youth in governance or program design, a hiring team, participation on a board, all those good things. So you can just think about what might be, what might be something that you could do that would take care of both of these things. So the big picture here is that we're getting better organizational structure and supports. And so thinking about if you have network level support here, what are additional resources or supports that would ensure program success? You can see some patterns and themes too, right? So if everyone is struggling with youth governance and like having or outreach to families or whatever it is, there might be some great resources. So that could be training and support around youth advisory councils or funding, professional development for staff and managers, and like working groups around family connections, all those good things, right? So you can kind of see where all these different parts and pieces come together to give you a good picture. And I just want to go back here really, really fast because it's this slide way at the beginning. It's this one, right? So when you think about where you can have those structures and those supports, it's really at the policy and organizational setting, which then gets you to higher point of service quality, even if you're not using Form A, but putting them together makes it even stronger. So it is, I don't know what time Alaska time, but it's 4:00 Central Time. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap it up here today?
Is there a full version of Form B in the TQA handbook? I'm just seeing like this. I don't know if you can see it on. Nope, that's not going to show up. Just the page 32 and 33 is just like an intro of Form B in the handbook. Is there a full version in there somewhere?
There should be a full version somewhere. So let me put it into the chat box and try this. And it should give you everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? That's a great question. Thanks, Erin. Any other questions? You can take a look at Form B on your own time.
We'll say, I know we're right at the hour as well. We have had some feedback from some providers as well that have been interested in Form B and interested in particular about questions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Schools at Washington, our peer network down in Washington has done some modifications on that form to do some work specifically around that kind of DEI component of programming. They have shared it with us. If you're interested on that, we would love to share that as well. That's something as we are developing our kind of quality work. We know that really looking at equity and inclusion and diversity is a critical part of our work here with Alaska. So if you're interested in seeing that form too, just feel free to reach out to me and I'll kick that your way. They've just kind of built out a component to the form around looking at that area.
And thanks everyone for your participation. It was a quick hour. Thanks for your patience with the dogs. And there's an evaluation link in the chat box here. You can definitely give some feedback if you would like, which would be always great. And so with that, thanks everyone for being here, and we'll stop the recording now, but we will hopefully see you again.